Hello and welcome to Geekatplay Studio Tutorials. In this tutorial we continue exploring non-photorealistic render options and we look on the shaders, and we have the hatch type of the options for our shader, which is more advanced than all other ones predefined. Will allow you to create with a higher flexibility different styles of the shadering non-realistic type. So let's look first. You notice we have a separate groups, which is help us to identify specific properties for the each strokes. So let's go from first stroke distribution. This is main array which apply globally for all strokes. Also, you notice that is the smaller lines they have it inside. They have the same parameters as aligned options inside. So let's go first, log to the object. You'll notice right here on the edge where we have it currently, if we uncheck to log to the object, we'll have it a little bit more lines going kind of like outline going out. By the way, for the test of the purpose, I take outline and I reduce the opacity to 0, so we don't have it outline kind of going inside. If for some reason you have it outline maybe very high set, you maybe see the outline line going. So when you experiment with the shaders and just test it, I do recommend set to the 0 opacity so it does not mess around with some lines, and you can always go and come back and add outline after. So right here you'll notice we add to the log object, and notice on the edges going directly between objects. Okay, it will lock those lines which is mixed together will kind of disappear because it will detect add of the end of the objects and will slightly decrease lines, doesn't allow them to go a stroke along of those lines. Next we have the break and the edges, and this primarily will be when you have longer type of the strokes. How it will detect on the edges and change directions, also when determined by the steps. Next we also have it sky and ground, and this is straightforward. You'll notice if we disable, we don't have it any strokes based on a sky or a ground. However, right here you'll notice we have it our terrain, which is different object, and it will apply to this terrain to the terrain material, but not to the ground itself, because if you look, we have it infinity ground, so it won't be applied to the ground, just only to the created objects or terrains. Steps is important because it's how they will calculate on a strokes how many steps take to calculate it. If you need increase the amount of the steps, that will also increase length of some strokes or how many times or take it's in calculating of the stroke how many steps. In some cases it's easy if you decrease, and you'll notice in some cases it will decrease, you have it less. Let me go ahead and decrease this one as well to quantity multiplier, and you'll notice how many steps it will reduce it. So if we have it only one step, you'll notice it will stop rendering or calculating in some areas. So it depends on how many steps, so many it's taken. If you want to create a smoother effect, you can increase. For example, if we go to very high 55 steps, you'll notice our line will become much smoother, longer. As well, in some cases where the object intersect is going out. So it's almost more like a sketch top with a long strokes creating. Again, but this is steps is calculating when it's generating lines. You also can increase smoothness by working with the quantity or quality multiplier for how many strokes. We'll look on this in a second, but overall now the steps, it will increase kind of lines, and you can create it all those steps how many calculated and some take out. Okay, let's go back to set default 5 steps. Edge preference, in some cases you won't see that big difference till you start working with the cross strokes and other ones, and you can modify values at this moment, but because we don't utilize so much other ones, you won't see any different at a point. But this is allowed to applications see how sensitive it's to the detecting edges or in a way it's set up. So by default, we'll set to the 0 right now. Let's go next. We'll look on a main stroke. And main stroke, you see right here, we have a direction of the main stroke. If we need enable, we can enable cross strokes, and we'll look on them in a second. But let's go back right here. Main stroke is kind of important because we can set up main directions, opacity, and how they work. You'll notice distribution currently, it says to uniform, which is take in account lightness or by the lightness or by the normals. If you switch any position by lightness, example, with the will calculate based on a darker shadow or light objects. You also notice, let me increase multiplier a little bit higher so we can see better effect in this case. And you notice right here we have the option appear edit. If we click on edit options, we'll have it input and output range, and also curve exponential, so it's how much it will increasing. Input, it's from 0 to 0.5, or you can go higher. 0 is the black, 1 is high, and it's mapped the input range. Again, this in some cases, imagine this is a mapping of the values of input and output, and also how much the curving is occurred. So you can also modify those values. So for example, an output range, let's go Z from 0 to 1. So we'll increase counter exponential on the lighting, which is produce a little bit more darker and lighter colors as we're going. Let's go to reduce maybe to the 4, so we can have a little bit more strokes visible and less population. Okay, same things applied by the normal, only on these cases calculation take by the from the normals of the object, we'll calculate it. And again, depend on which way you're going, if you want to go by the lighting or by the actual texturing or normal shapes of the terrains and other things, so you can work either way. So same things, if you work with normals, you notice right here we have it same options. You can modify and change this. So let's go set 0.5, a little bit less. So in this way it will apply calculations based. So notice right here when I set 1 to 0, now we have it inverted. So this effect we have it invert on our object. So again, we inverted 0 to 1, 5. Again, so let's go back to maybe set 0.5. I want display sky up. And we have it an expansion right now 0.5, so it should be reinvert back the values. But because I allowed a little bit better mapping, I have it clouds popping, start kind of coming up right here. So overall, based on our mapping, imagine this is your dark, the brighter, so values you're calculating and values you're mapping, and curve exponential, how much of those values you want to increase. Okay, quantum multiplier, it is how many strokes will apply. So currently, if we put it just one stroke, so it'll be very just a one light calculating. It's how many samples will take it going through this. If we have a 0, obviously it should be all white, no calculations. And if you want a very solid, if you increase amount of them, you'll notice as well it's become quite a bit smooth and more samples will done. Depend on what you try to achieve with the strokes. You can go with a full filler, or you can go with the less strokes, increase size of them, and work as a watercolor or other effect. Okay, so let's go back to uniform, and we'll just set back to 5. Notice right here we have a link range. This is correspondent to the link range of the strokes, and this is again main strokes. So in some cases, if I want to do point, I can say 1 1, which is just a single dot points. And you can notice we will create just slightly strokes, but they're almost like a dots. So in some cases, if you want to have a pointillism or some kind of effect on the painting, you can modify link range of those strokes and they will be applied. Of course, anytime you can say I want range strokes from 10 to maybe 500, which should have it very long, and right here you can preview lines which is created from link from 10 short lines and same time long lines. So again, this is apply link range.